Three, two, one, go live. All right, and we're live. Welcome to Hit or Miss Special Edition Through the Looking Glass interview with the Canadian. So, yeah, tonight's a special edition episode where I'm going to talk to this Canadian guy I know, and he's going to go over some of the Canadian gun laws and the gun crises that's going on in Canada right now, as well as a couple other questions off the bat. If you've got a question for him, go make sure to do at Night Strike and your question for him, or send in a super chat with your question for him. But remember, keep it clean, because if it's not clean, I'm not going to mess with it. So just remember that. All right, let's see. Guess we're having issues. Great. Well, if I have to open up OBS and do that, we'll do that too. We'll do it that way too. So it doesn't matter. All right. Let me get everything set up here on the side, and I'll try and get this on the road. Let's see. YouTube side is saying you're not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Viewers will continue to experience buffering. All right. Well, we're going to experience buffering. Great. This would happen right at the start. Us live. Anybody else live? Let's see. No, it doesn't say it. All right. Just my luck.
What's going on?
I may have to redo. Hold on. I may have to redo things on the server.
Okay.
So I had to redo a couple things. Hopefully it's working fine now. You gotta wait for it. All right, we're back. All right, okay. I'm here joined tonight with Canadian. Well, he says he's Canadian. I don't know. We'll ask him. We'll ask him in a minute if he is a Canadian. But you want me to use your first name? Or you want me to just use your YouTube name? What do you prefer?
I'd prefer using my username for now.
Okay. All right. So his name is Canuck GunNut. He is on YouTube. So the description in the description is a link to his YouTube channel if you want to check him out. He does stuff. He rants about stuff. He does kind of a bit of everything. So. Canuck, you're a real Canadian, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Born and raised.
Okay, we got an actual Canadian here tonight. So, all right, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us something that we don't already know.
Well, as you already know, my name's Canuck GunNut. I'm a born and raised actual Canadian, and I've dealt with a lot of the BS we've had to put up with Canadian firearms law-wise, and as a result, I'm quite familiar with the subject. I'm not an expert on it. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but I am very familiar with it.
Well, we're very familiar with gun laws here in the United States, too, even though I'm not a lawyer either, but I know most of the major ones.
So do I.
Yeah. But again, we're gonna for those here in the United States who don't necessarily know what you guys have to deal with on a daily basis, that's why we're doing this episode. So, all right. What is it saying? All right. All right. So, okay. Let me go through some of the questions we got. Again, if you got a question for Canuck GunNut, we will go over those at the end. Just make sure you do at Night Strike in the question or in the super chat. Give us the question form. But again, remember, keep it clean, keep it PG-13, and if it's not, then I'm not going to answer, or I'm not going to even ask. So just beware. All right. So first up, you're aware of the gun laws we have here in the United States, like the NFA, the GCA, the machine gun ban, and the assault weapons ban that expired.
Oh, yes, the 1934 National Firearms Act, the 1968 Gun Control Act, the 1986 Hugh Amendment to the Firearms Owner Protection Act.
Hughes Amendment, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the now expired 1994 to 2004 federal assault weapons ban, as well as various state-level laws, including California.
Actually, well, yeah. With some states are more restricted than federal level, but that's literally just the Northeast and the West Coast.
Yeah,
and that's just the actual coastal states. Arizona's an exemption from that. So is Utah and a couple other western states. But again, yeah, there are some states that are more restrictive. But I would assume there's some provinces more restrictive than federal level, even in Canada.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that because unlike the United States, where the vast majority of the gun laws, with the exception of stuff like the National Firearms Act and that, are at a state level, here in Canada, with one very notable exception, they're mostly federal. The exception being the province of Quebec. They have some of their own stricter stuff that I'll go into detail a little later. But for all intents and purposes...
Leave it to the Frenchies.
Yeah.
Leave it to the Frenchies. All right. So okay. Knowing the U.S. laws, could you guide us through some of the laws is similar to those laws that you guys have to deal with?
It's actually kind of hard to mention because we've got things that very few U.S. states have, but the closest I would say would probably be somewhere like New York State and a few others. The big one that separates...
Let's go federal, countrywide.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. The vast majority of our gun laws are federal, but the one thing that sets us apart from the United States is, unlike in the United States, where firearms ownership is a constitutionally guaranteed and protected right via Second Amendment, here in Canada, it is not. And subsequently, we do not have any real constitutional protection against draconian gun control legislation. With that said, there are organizations trying, but I'll save that for another bit. But part of that is, in order to possess a firearm in this country, you must have a license in order to possess it. And there are multiple subclasses, which we'll get into later. But the general gist is, if I don't have a valid firearms license, I can't even touch a gun legally.
Are you sure you're not in California?
California does not have a license requirement as strict as we do.
Okay, so you're in Illinois.
Like, Illinois is actually, yeah, that's right. Illinois is honestly a closer equivalent because they're the only state that I am aware of where you must have a license just to even possess a firearm. They're the only U.S. state that has a law similar to us there.
I think Illinois is the one where you can't own a gun if you don't have a
firearms owner's identification card.
Oh. So New York is a close second.
And that's mainly because they have some of their laws are similar to us. Like, for example, their magazine capacity restrictions, their very onerous carry restrictions. Although, again, with handguns, there's stuff we do that's even stricter than them, but we'll get to that later.
Right. So guide us through the federal level, okay?
Well, like I said, the big thing is everyone who wants to have a gun in this country, legally anyways, they must be licensed to do so. And in order to get that firearms license, the very first thing you have to do is you must complete a firearm safety course called the Canadian Firearm Safety Course. And it's basically just your general basic firearm safety course. Like, say, if you've ever taken an NRA basic safety course, it's similar to that. The only difference is we have to take it. You have no choice. There was a time where you could challenge the test, but we'll go over that in the history portion if we ever get to that.
Daniel, it's way past Biker Bob's bedtime.
But in order to feel the context slightly, in the United States, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the ideas of the difference between, say, a Title I firearm and something like a short barrel shotgun, a short barrel rifle, and a machine gun as per the NFA, that sort of thing, how there's different legal
short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, machine guns, and then we've got, any other weapon which doesn't fit the other.
Point being is that's the closest equal we have to our firearm classification system, because in Canada, there are 3 different classifications for firearm. There's non-restricted, restricted, prohibited, and there's technically a fourth one called antiques, but you don't require a license for those. It'd be the equivalent of, say, cap and ball revolvers and any muzzle loader down in your country.
So you don't require a license, so you could literally get a cap and ball and not have a license card.
We'll get to that because there's a bit more. It's a bit more complex than what you guys have. But for all intents and purposes, if a firearm fits in an antique class, you don't need a firearm license in order to possess it, acquire it, or even use it. And trust me, that can come in handy for some of these. But we'll get to that. I'll clarify that later.
Okay.
But the point being, the other three, non-restricted, restricted, and prohibited, you need a firearm license for those. And of those three categories, the average Joe can only get the first two, non-restricted and restricted. And to clarify those, non-restricted is most rifles and shotguns, with some exceptions. Restricted is mostly handguns and some semi-auto rifles, with exceptions. And prohibited is everything that's been illegal. And within prohibited, there are multiple subclasses. But again, we will clarify that at a later point. Just for the purpose of this, firearms that are prohibited class, with notable exceptions, are illegal firearms. There are exceptions to that, of course.
Right.
And you generally cannot get that unless you've been grandfathered in, which, again, I will clarify that at a later point.
Okay.
And in order to get the first two, you have to complete one safety course for each. There's the firearm safety course, which mainly applies to non-restricted, and the restricted firearm safety course, which applies to those. And if you complete one or both, because you must have the non-restricted course regardless of which classes you wish to acquire. If you complete one or both courses, then you get a form that you have to fill out with all this information, which I will actually bring this up. I have a reference to the actual form here. Give me a quick moment. I'll even share my screen to show you guys this.
Go ahead. We'll
Okay, I'll save that for later.
give it priority.
Yeah, I'm just getting to it. Firearms forms, individual licensing, and perfect. I could show this via PDF. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
The bottom, it's the third one over. Says share your screen.
Yeah, I see that. All right, there's that. Can you guys see this?
Well, we're on a delay, but I can see it, and we'll make it the priority. So.
All right, so if you can see what I'm showing, this is the first page of the firearm license form, and this is mostly information that explains what it is. Like, for example, it defines what a non-restricted or restricted firearm is to more detail than what I'll describe at a later point. But basically, when you get this form after you complete the courses. One of the first thing you have to do is fill this out, where you'd be like, oh, I never have a firearms license, what language you are, what classes you want, firearms that you have.
Now you said that there's like three licenses. There's the non-restricted, restricted, and prohibited. Could you take the course for the prohibited even if you don't get the license?
You see, that's kind of the thing. There's only two safety courses, non-restricted and restricted. The only way you could get prohibited is through very special circumstances. So, for example, if you're a museum and you have a bunch of prohibited class firearms on display, or you happen to own certain classes of certain firearms that were previously restricted or non-restricted, but then became prohibited later on, which that will be very relevant.
Do they have an exemption for collectors?
Technically, no, because collectors are treated as a different thing altogether under this license system. It's mainly applies to restricted class, but to put it bluntly, if you have prohibited class firearms, with some exceptions, depending on the subclass, they are either relegated as safe queens that can never be legally used, and we'll explain why at a later point. Or in the case of one specific subclass, you can only take them to and from the firing range, no different than a restricted class firearm, which that is actually another thing that separates our gun laws from the United States. But we'll go through the form first. So yeah,
you guys get hosed.
Yeah, like trust me, there's some stuff that would be draconian even by California or New York standards that we have to put up with. But anyways, you'd put what class of firearms you own, which say if you didn't have any firearms, you would click this one, which then you would indicate the classes you want, and there's also portions that are relevant to natives. By the way, a non-resident of Canada can apply for a firearms license, and they actually mention that here. If you're not a resident of Canada, which province or territory will you be using your firearms the most when in Canada?
Well, I do know there is a specific form that I have to apply for if I want to bring my guns with me up into Canada for hunting purposes.
Yes, that is right. That is actually a firearm declaration form. Let me go ahead and bring that up just so I can save it for later.
Because I have a friend that goes up and hunts in the western part of Canada, every year, and he's invited me a couple times to go with him. It's just, I just haven't been able to, and it's just like I'm always weary because half of my guns I don't think are legal in your country.
Yeah, trust me, we'll go over the definitions of each class later, but yeah, this is the sheet you would need, the non-resident firearm declaration form. And it very clearly explains what is a non-restricted or restricted firearm here, except it doesn't go through the entire list of prohibited firearms.
Right.
Because part of what allows you to determine whether a firearm is restricted, non-restricted, or prohibited is barrel length, and especially applicable to handguns. But we'll get to that at a later point. But anyways, basically what you would do for that is fill out all the relevant information here, for the reasons for bringing, and you mentioned hunting, so you'd click that here, your personal info, the firearms you have, their exact serial number, shotgun, rifle, combo gun, handgun, other specified, what action they have, etc., etc. And you do this for multiple firearms. They do have a continuation sheet, so you could put more than 3, and then you'd sign it off. And once you have all this filled out, you would basically this basically becomes a temporary firearms license for a non-resident.
Right. That's what I figured it was, but you have to file it and you have to get it. Make sure you
also
get
have to present
on it being filed before you go in. Otherwise,
and when you do, you also have to present this document to the CBSA agents on the Canadian side of the border when you enter the country.
Right.
Without you'd have to basically do it right there. But yeah, that's a whole other ball game altogether. But yeah, you'd have to do something like this in order to bring your firearms into Canada. And let me make this clear. If you're an American and you want to bring guns to Canada, please, for the love of God, leave anything that would be considered prohibited or restricted at home, because it is way the fuck more of a pain in the ass to deal with that shit up here than it is worth it. Unless you happen to be attending a competition shoot where you have to use a handgun, which that point you would actually be justified in having the restricted BS, then yeah, otherwise I would say don't even bother trying to bring a gun that would be restricted or prohibited here, especially if it's prohibited. Like, don't try to bring your carry gun. Don't try to bring guns that were questionable legal status here. Don't bring any full autos, none of that shit. Leave that shit at home, because trying to get through that whole crap is not worth it. Believe me, it is not worth it.
Well, honestly, if anybody owned a full auto, they wouldn't take it to Canada in the first place, because
exactly.
they gotta get permission to take it anywhere from the ATF in the first place.
Huh. Anyway,
let's circle back to the to the licenses. Okay, so you got to take for the first 2 licenses, you've got to take courses, but there's not one for prohibited, and there was that form we were going over.
Yeah, we're doing that right now, the license form, because there's some other relevant information on here that has to be clever. But I will say, prohibited, you can only get this under very specific circumstances. And in my case, depending on what the government does, I could technically have a prohibited subclass. I have to make it clear, subclass, because within prohibited classes, there's at least 5 or 6 different subclasses. And that all coincides with various times they've banned large numbers of firearms en masse. We'll get to that at a later point. After that portion, you then put your personal info, your contact info, what proof of identity. So in my case, the most common way is via provincially issued driver's license, in order to prove who you are, your address. And then there's this portion, a personal history portion. This may seem familiar to anyone who's ever filled a 4473 in the United States, because it's kind of modeled on that, but a little more simplified. I must mention that this current version of the form is under the post-Bill C-68 stuff. In previous years, this only applied to the last 5 years of your life, while here, it applies to your lifetime. Just making context for that.
Right.
However, unlike the United States, and there's this little blurb here that explains this, if you answer yes to any of the questions in this section, you must provide details on a separate page. Add your name at the top of each page you attach. If details are not provided, your application cannot be processed. A yes answer does not mean your application will be refused, but it may lead to further examination. If you've been granted a record suspension or a pardon or any offense listed in box 16A, you are not required to disclose the offense. Basically, what this means is if you say yes to any of these questions, you are obligated to explain on a separate page what exactly you mean by that. And with the way some of these questions are worded, it'll become clear why. And the first question, have you ever been charged, convicted, or granted of a discharge for an offense under the Criminal Code or the Used Criminal Justice Act where violence was used, threatened, or attempted, involving the misuse, possession, or storage of a firearm, or involving trafficking or importing drugs or controlled substances? And then you'd answer yes or no that. B, 16B, have you ever been subject to a peace bond, protection order, or an order under Section H10 of the Criminal Code? Basically what that means is if you've been charged for a crime or some other thing and you have a specific legal order from the judge saying that you have something like this on you. It's 16C, have you or any member of your household ever been prohibited from possessing any firearm? A little bit of context for this one. One of the things we do is, unlike in the United States, where if you've ever been convicted of a drug offense or any felony crime or been dishonorably discharged, basically anything you answer yes to on a Form 4473. Here in Canada, you can get firearms prohibitions ordered by a judge. And that usually happens when you've been sentenced for a crime. And what that means is for either a set period of time or for the rest of your lifetime, you are legally unable to acquire a firearm even if you go through this process. So say, for example, let's say someone got convicted for theft and the theft was like over $5,000. And the judge decides, you know what, I'm going to put a 1-year firearm prohibition on you. What that would mean is that person would not be legally allowed to try and acquire a firearm or even possess a firearm or any other weapon on them for that 1-year period.
Well, let me ask you this: after that 1 year is up, what would be the procedure to go and apply for a firearm after that?
You would put it here, and because of this is a lifetime check, what you'd have to do is click yes and explain exactly when the charge was, what it was, or any of that, and explain the length of time. Because I know people who have to answer yes on this question, and it was because they happen to live with a family member who had a firearms prohibition against them for a crime they committed, and because they clearly explained what it was and they were able to confirm that, they got the firearm license anyway. 16D, have you ever threatened or attempted suicide, or have you ever suffered from or been diagnosed or treated by a medical practitioner for depression, alcohol, drug or substance abuse, behavioral problems, or emotional problems? And this is a very broad question. It's not like the Form 4473 where the only way this would apply is if you were involuntarily committed to a mental facility, if I recall that correctly.
Well, yeah, adjudicated by a judge.
In this case, it applies anytime you had to go to a medical practitioner for any of these things mentioned. So for example, let's say you have a depressive episode and you go to the hospital and talk to your doctor about suffering from depression. You'd have to answer yes on this and explain that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Let's move along.
Okay. But there were 2 final questions, the last 2 which are really relevant here and really set this apart from the United States. Do you know if you have ever been reported to the police or social services for violence, threatened or attempted violence, or other conflict in your home or elsewhere? You don't have to be arrested for a crime.
So basically domestic abuse.
What this means is not just domestic abuse, but it also means simply being reported to the police for something like this requires you to say yes on it. Not being convicted or charged, simply being reported to. And you'd have to click yes and explain that.
How does that work?
Basically,
if you're not charged, if you're not taken to court over, how does that work?
Basically, the way policing works here is every time they interact with someone, they have to report on it. And in other words, say someone falsely claimed you were going to beat somebody up and the police had to talk to you. You'd have to answer yes on this and clarify.
And how would you know? If somebody reported you, but the police didn't inform you, how would you know?
Honestly, that's part of the reason why they have to put the do you know portion, which I feel is a bit questionable. But anyways, and then the final one, and this one really sets us apart from the United States. During the past 2 years, have you experienced a divorce, a separation, a breakdown of a significant relationship, job loss, or bankruptcy?
Okay. That's a little personal, isn't it?
Oh, trust me, it gets even worse with the next section, because this next section really, a bit of context, because of the...
Am I reading that right? Conjugal status?
Yes. Yes, and let me clarify this. You must answer both set questions, 17A and B, or your license application will be delayed. 17A, do you currently have a spouse, common law, or other conjugal partner? And if you click yes, which if you're married, you would have to, you must complete the next section after this. 17B, within the last 2 years, have you lived in a conjugal relationship other than with the person you may have referred to in question 17A? I don't think that would apply to most people, but the point being is that if you broke up with someone and then got in a relationship with someone else and somehow got married or whatever, then you'd have to click yes. Then, this is the part that's questionable. You must provide information about your current conjugal partner. Last name of current spouse, common law or other conjugal partner, first name, middle name, date of birth, and they have to sign off on it. And if they don't, if the signature of your current spouse, common law, or other conjugal partner is not provided, the chief firearms officer has a duty to notify them of your application.
Okay.
That also applies to former conjugal partners, which that is even worse.
Oh my God.
So let's say you had some crazy broad who divorced you after 2 years. You would be legally obligated to tell them who that person is. Although they do put a portion like, I declare that I do not know the current address and or telephone number of my former spouse. So that makes that a little easier. And if you don't have that signature, they are legally obligated to tell them you're getting a firearms license, which there's a reason for that, why they do this. And you're not going to like that reason.
Oh, I'm sure I can guess. All right. So there's the information. I see the information for the training.
Yeah. This is the portion where you would attach when you completed the training certificates, because you have to attach them with the form as well as what province year completed and proof attached. When you do this once, they have it on record for the rest of your life. There's also a portion that is specifically to Manitoba and Quebec, but that's a not exactly relevant for most people these days. Then there's the reference portion, where I don't know if there's any portion in the United States where you have to do this, but the idea being is that a reference is anyone who has known you for at least 3 years and is at least 18 years old. However, he or she cannot be your current conjugal partner. In other words, like say a really close friend or nowadays a close family relative. There was a time where they had to have known you for 5 years and they couldn't be relatives of yours. But for pretty fucking obvious reasons, they have since changed that.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to provide their info and they have to sign off on it.
Yeah, we don't have that here in the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And yes, there's a reason they put this in. Normally, they are supposed to call your references up and ask them a bunch of questions about you. Basically, they look for any violence-related questions, shit like that. But there are times that, especially if the person has a very clean record and otherwise has no indication that the person would be a problem if they had firearms, they sometimes don't even call the references. I know in my case, they certainly didn't.
I see you have to do the photo part there.
Oh yeah, because it's a photo ID. You have to have a photo, and the whole point of a photo guarantor.
Now, what kind of photo do you have to have? Is it like a passport photo or something?
Yeah, it's very similar to that. However, we're very lenient on it. There's actually a section further up which explains what the photo requirement is. And you are not required to submit a passport type photograph or a photograph that has been taken by a professional photographer. However, your photograph must meet the following criteria: show a full frontal view of your head and shoulders. Use a plain contrasting background without shadows. Do not wear a hat or sunglasses. Your eyes should be clearly visible and should not appear to be red. The photo should have been taken within the last 12 months, and the photo should be no larger than certain size dimensions. The photo must be original, not taken from an existing photo. Digitally produced photos are acceptable provided all other requirements are met. And yes, they have actually changed it now where if you renew your firearms license online, you can submit a digital photo, and people will literally just do it on their smartphones.
Right.
It's very weird because it's the only type of government ID that has such a lenient requirement.
Okay. All right. And that's the form.
Yeah, and then the last portion is the fees, because yes, you do in fact have to pay for this stuff.
Yeah, obviously, because it doesn't matter what country, the liberals tax and tax and tax.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn off screen sharing for right now.
Right. Okay. So that's in order to get a permit to own a firearm, right?
As well as acquire it.
Okay. So so what was required? What about the federal restrictions? Okay.
Well, that is part of here's the thing I'm trying to make clear is that the vast overwhelming majority of our gun laws are federal. It's not like you guys.
I know that, but what I'm getting at is, so you don't have like an NFA, you don't have like a GCA or a Hughes Amendment or anything.
Oh, we've had amendments to the firearms laws over the years, and they've changed relative. Like our gun laws have changed really dramatically over the years.
Okay, of guns and weapons, what can't you own besides what they've done so far right now previously?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I hate to say it, but this will include the stuff that has been done recently because of the way they do the prohibited weapon list.
Okay.
But in order to, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again, because trust me, this is a lengthy list. Google Chrome share. And this, what you're about to read, is the entire list of firearms that have been prohibited. This includes non-firearms too. We're gonna go
right, because I was gonna ask about what about non-firearms?
What the fuck? Wait a minute. I thought this had the list. Where the hell's the list? Okay, this is
your list is gone.
Oh, here it is. So yeah, there's been a bunch of stuff here that isn't firearms, but they banned them anyway. For example, very first one here. Any firearm capable of discharging a dart or other object carrying an electrical current or substance, including a firearm of the design commonly known as the taser, public defender, and any variant or modified version of it. In other words, tasers are prohibited firearms here. Well, prohibited weapons here.
Slow down a little bit. Slow down.
Yeah, tasers are prohibited here. You're going to see a pattern when we go through this. The firearm known as the SS-1 Stinger and any similar firearm designed of or of a size to fit in the palm of the hand. Oh yeah, this next one's going to piss off any movie buffs or collectors. The firearm design commonly known as Franchi Spas 12 shotgun, and a variant or modified version of it, including the Franchi LAW 12 shotgun.
So the SPOS 12 and the Law 12,
They're
nada.
banned. And here's the worst part. When these ones were banned and everything under this specific firearms order were banned, there was no grandfathering position. People who had these guns had no choice but to turn them in.
But here's one. Here's one that's familiar. The next
Oh
one.
yeah, they banned those here.
The
They banned
Striker
those.
12 and the Street Sweeper, which technically both of those, unless you have one that wasn't banned, they were banned here in the United States. That's why not a lot of them didn't come in after the ban.
Yeah, we definitely banned them here too.
Yeah. So
they also banned the USAS 12,
yeah,
the
we
SPAS
banned
15.
that too, but that was banned because technically it was a machine gun.
Yeah, this one is going to piss off a lot of people. The Benelli M1 Super 90s and the Benelli M3 Super 90s are also banned here. And the reason why? Because both of those shotguns, like the SPAS 12 and the SPAS 15, are semi-auto shotguns that can allow themselves to function as a pump action. Yeah, I don't know either, but at least with the SPAS 12, people did feel that they banned them because they looked scary. But you can't really say the same thing about the Benelli M1s or M3s. Ironically, the M2s and the M4s are still legal.
Yeah, which is weird because it's the same thing.
Except semi-auto only. Like, again, it's dumb. They also banned something called the Bernardelli.
I don't understand why you'd want to ban a gun that's semi-auto and pump. It can do either or. In case it's not doing well in semi-auto, you just do it in pump. That way,
honestly, you'd have to ask the people that wrote this list down. And they also banned the American 180 Auto 50s. They also banned the Barrett M8281s and Model 90s. Basically all
your 50 cals.
Yeah, well, the Barrett specifically, the semi-auto ones.
Okay.
The Coleco M900 rifle and any of its variants, the Iver Johnson AMAC.
That's a 22.
Yeah. They don't care what the caliber is. The Macmillan M87, Palza Specialties P50 rifle and carbine, the NCOM Mark IV, NCOM MP9, the FAMAS, including the semi-auto versions, the Feather 18-9 semi-auto carbine.
Semi-auto versions haven't been imported into any country since like the 90s.
This is why. Because they were banned by a lot of countries. In Canada, many of these this specific order, a lot of these date back to the 90s, these prohibition lists. And this one being number 11, there was no grandfathering provision for any of these, so keep that in mind. The HKG11, yeah. This is not a joke. They actually banned the HKG11 by name. I don't need to explain to anyone who knows anything about HK's history why this is ridiculous. Keep in mind, when this prohibition list came out, full autos were already banned. The RAI Model 500, Spectre also fun, PMA, Weaver Arms, AR9.
The T11 was a prototype.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly why. Like, I don't understand why. I
think there was only like 2 or 3 actually made.
Yeah, a bunch of the other guns on this list are very obscure. Like, there's also the Bushmaster auto pistol.
I guess any AR-15 9mm.
The Tech 9s are banned.
No.
We'll get to the AR-15s eventually, because they're on this list too later on, and that's the most recent ban.
You got it right there. It says the AA Arms Model AR-9 carbine. So basically, any 9mm AR-15 is banned too.
That's a very specific variation. Like, I must mention too, because some of these are very specific in what they ban. The Scorpion auto pistol, which is ironic because for a while they had its updated brother, the Scorpion Evo, was legal for a short time in this country, but we'll get to that. The Spectre Auto, the Sterling Mark 7. This includes the C4 and the C8s, which were in Canadian military service at one time. The Universal Enforcer Model 3000 auto carbine. The Gaunt's high-tech long pistol. The Olympic Arms 93 assault pistol. The Patriot pistol. I bet I know exactly where they got this name from.
Yeah, I can tell you.
Somebody who wrote this list must have played Metal Gear Solid 3, because I don't know of anyone that refers to an AR-15 handgun as a Patriot pistol.
No, not in the United States.
And then a bunch of others, blah, blah, blah. The Steyr, SPP, Mighty Griffin. That's the end of that list. That entire list, the number 11 list, they did not have grandfathering provision. The next one, the number 12.
Okay, so they didn't have grandfathering. What did people do then?
They had no choice but to turn them in or else go to prison or die.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, they really did come to the door and be like, hey, do you happen to have these guns? Oh, did I also mention by this point long gun registration was mandatory?
Yeah, I heard there was a long gun registration and they got rid of it.
Yeah, there's a bit of history behind that. We'll get to that at another point. Oh yeah,
Okay.
this is a very short weapons list, and the guns on this list almost didn't wound up the same as the last, but they did at the last minute get a grandfathering, and subsequently it's the least common grandfather class. The Sterling Mark 6, the Steyr AUG, the Uzi, the Mac 10, Mac 11s, the Partisan Avenger pistol, and the Uzi. We're all in part of this, and this would be the 12.4 Prohib class. Number 13, this is the 12.5 Prohib class, and people did grandfather these, and yeah, you can probably already tell this is not going to be a fun portion of the list.
No, I could just. It's basically every AK variant.
Yep, every AK variant that existed in the 1990s. However, here's a weird part about this though. There is actually an exception. As it mentioned, the firearm design commonly known as the AK-47 rifle, any variant or modified version of it, except for the Valmet Hunter, the Valmet Hunter Auto, and the Valmet M78 rifles.
But if you go look at the bottom, they're stating Valmet's in there.
Yeah, but the other variations, which is weird, because the reason why those were exempted, no one's quite knows for certain, but the common story that goes around is that at the time they banned the AKs, the government had just given the people of what is now the province of Nunavut, the Inuit people, a whole bunch of these as a gift from the government. And then they realized it would look really bad if they just gave these guns to the Inuit, only to then immediately take them away because they banned them.
And the Inuit are your Native Americans, right?
Well, they're one specific tribe of Native Canadians. Okay. They're specifically the people that live in the north. You'd probably know them under the now outdated term Eskimo, which they would rather be called Inuit.
Which they're also in Alaska too. So
yeah, exactly. But they're the northern natives, basically. Right. But anyways, all the AKs are banned, and if it's not mentioned on this list, it's banned by action. So I've heard of many stories of people trying to get guns like arsenals into the country, only to find last minute, oh yeah, because it's an AK, it's banned.
You know what I don't see on 180? This list? You know what I don't see on this list yet?
What?
That one you just built the other day.
What do you mean the one I just built?
The Type 81.
Yes, those aren't banned yet.
That's
at the time there was no sporter versions coming into the country, and I don't think the Chinese were aware that they could have technically sold them here back in the 90s. Because I know they were working on a semi-auto only version that only a handful of them got imported into the United States. And as a result, they was really bad timing for them because of the 1989 import ban. Oh yeah, other guns on this portion. The AR-180 Sporter carbine. You know, the AR-18, AR-180, the Beretta AR-70, the BM-59. You should know what that is.
That's literally just an M1 Garand M14, more or less.
Oh, this becomes really stupid when you realize that at this time when this prohibition came out, the M1 Garand, the Mini 14, and the M14 rifles were still legal. That'll get changed in a bit, but we'll get there. Bushmaster auto rifle, the Setmes, the Daewoo K1s, the K2s, the TAC M1, the Deagle Apache, the FNCs, all the FALs. This one really pissed off people when this happened because up until the
FAL was a NATO only rifle.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. At the time this ban happened,
some countries are still using that.
We were still using the FALs. Because as late as 1990, there were still Canadian Forces Reserve units still using the C1 rifles, which was our designation for the FNFAL. And subsequently, there were a lot of guys, veterans and active duty guys, that had their own personally owned FAL rifles. And they were really fucking pissed when this happened for obvious reasons.
I'm surprised they didn't riot.
That's a whole other story altogether. There's the G3s they got banned, all the Galils, the Gaunt's high-tech carbine, I don't know what that is, the HK33s, the JRNR, Leader M, the MP5s, as well as all of its semi-auto variants, including the HK94s, the PE57, the SIG 550, and 551 carbines. This actually is a bit more complicated because you technically were able to get a legal version of this up until recently, but we'll get to that later. The SIG AMT, the SAR-48, all the Tommy guns are banned, including the semi-auto versions, which is stupid. Well, because one, the full auto ones would have already been covered under the full auto ban that happened back in 1977. And secondly, this is a historic gun. But anyways, they banned them all, and that's that. Everything under this category is under the most recent ban. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to go through the whole list of every variation, but I'll just show this. Last year in May, the government decided via the Canadian equivalent of an order in council, executive order, an order in council, to ban the following guns: all AR-10 and AR-15 pattern rifles, and they also include M16 and M4 carbines as well, all Ruger Mini 14s, all VC-58s, all M14 rifles, all Beretta CX4 Storm carbines.
Hold up. For the longest time, you couldn't really get an AK in Canada. The only thing you could get was a VZ58, so they decided to get rid of that loophole.
Well, under that, the Type 81 is the closest we can get to an AK now, but yeah, there was a long time people could own VZ58s here, and many people bought them because of the fact it's the closest you could get to an AK prior to the Type 81.
And now they're saying, you know that gun you have, you can't have that anymore.
Oh yeah, trust me, they picked these guns for a reason, and by reason I mean BS.
They're trying to assert more control. That's what they're doing.
Oh, the XCR one really confuses me because this is going to sound dumb, but with the exception of this, and this, every other gun here was used in at least one mass shooting either in the United States or in Canada. Most of them being in Canada. Yeah. AR-15 speaks for itself. The gun haters in this country hate this thing. Mini 14, 1989 École Polytechnique Massacre. The most notable mass shooting in Canada. VZ58. We'll get to that. That's just two things. We'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, the Ruger Mini 14 got banned because of that. VZ58 was used in a mass shooting in Quebec City, which is funny because in that particular instance, the rifle jammed and he had to use a 9mm pistol that the guy brought with him. That's another story. M14, Moncton shooting. I'll leave it at that. The Beretta CX4, Dawson College. XCR, I don't know of a single mass shooting in this country or even in the United States where somebody used an XCR.
You stopped at other. Keep going down. Keep scrolling.
That's these two.
I can't see them. You got to scroll.
Well, I am scrolling.
It apparently it froze on you then.
Okay then. Oh, I think I know why. Because it's on the list still. I was showing the.
You weren't showing anything. You were just showing the list. You installed on the list.
My bad. I'll correct that. Stop sharing. Share your screen. Entire screen. Share. Okay. There. This is what I was showing.
Okay. All right.
This list. So there's these guns here, but then there's these two. Firearms with 20mm bores or greater, and firearms capable of discharging a projectile with a muzzle energy greater than 10,000 joules. The 20mm ban, the intention of that was to ban pretty much every single grenade, flare, missile, any launcher type weapon. Which effectively meant that, say, oh, you owned an RPG-7 that has a 7.62x39 insert, that's banned. And they did put it on the list too, alongside a shitload of other missile launchers. Yeah, really, they did. This was a very recent thing.
That's ridiculous.
And the other one here, the intention for this was to ban anti-materiel rifles by their power level so that they couldn't just change the caliber or something like that. But in the process, what they wound up banning as well, they banned all Nitro Express firearms, 600 Nitro and higher. So say if you happen to own
basically all the old elephant guns banned.
Other than 500 Nitro or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are prohibited guns now in the same league as all of these, which is really dumb. But anyways, we'll get back to the list. So this one is that OIC list, because the 12.5 was the last major one where they banned guns via OIC prior to this one. Right. And they only did this via OIC in direct response to the Nova Scotia shooting, which is really stupid because that particular shooting was done by a man who didn't have a firearms license and all his firearms were illegally acquired. Oh yeah, no, they also decided to ban a shitload of anti-materiel rifles and other big bore rifles by name too at that time. And you'll notice a few familiar names if you were to scroll through this list yourself. Yes, that includes this. This is a Zastava M93. Those are banned here too. Also, apparently there were people that own 50 cals semi-auto only, which is weird. Oh yeah, and here's the restricted by name order.
That's not so weird. People own them here too.
Yeah, but the restricted by name order. At the time there were two guns on this list. Now there's only one. That one being the HS Model 10. If any of you have played Call of Duty Black Ops, it's that weird bullpup shotgun. Those are restricted by name firearm here, and they're treated the same as handguns. The other used to be AR-15s, and that's how I got the ones I have. Because at the time, they were restricted firearms, which meant they were legal to own, but they were treated differently than non-restricted firearms, and then the rest is other shit. Oh, God, and here's the other non-gun shit. Tear gas, mace gas, any sort of liquid chemical spray.
So you can't have mace.
Yes, there is, however, a weird loophole with that. You can have bear spray and dog spray, but you can't have proper pepper spray.
So you can't have proper pepper spray for people, but you can have it for bears or dogs.
Yeah,
And you can only use it on bears or dogs.
Yes, I was about to clear that up, because if you use it on the other person, you just use a prohibited weapon on somebody.
Yeah, that's
You're going to notice a pattern with this, where every possible non-lethal way to defend oneself, other than like a baseball bat or shit like that, is basically made illegal.
right.
Yeah, nunchucks are banned, shurikens are banned.
And nunchucks.
There actually is a slight exception to that, but yes, they did. They banned this entire portion is nothing but martial arts weapons that are Japanese made, other than fingering.
Hold on. I got to do this on camera. Get my shotgun. We need to go up to Canada and get their nunchucks back.
But yeah, this specific order, I'm 100% certain, was written by a guy who just watched some Bruce Lee martial arts movies and shit his pants when he saw these weapons.
He watched Return of the Dragon. That's what happened. All right.
And a lot of people are convinced that most of these prohibited weapons lists, including the most recent one, happened because someone decided to pick up a copy of Soldier of Fortune magazine and flip through the gun ads and like, that's scary, ban it. That's scary, ban it.
Soldier of Fortune has been out of print for years now. All right,
yeah, but at the 90s, it was around. In the 90s, it was around.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a polite pause real quick. We got a super chat from Daniel saying, $2 saying, nice strike, get the queen on the line and sort this all out. Honestly, Daniel, I'm about to. We need to get their nunchucks back. They are nunchuckless.
The queen doesn't care. I hate to break it to you guys. The queen does not care. No kidding.
That's the joke. That is the joke.
Anyways. But yeah, then there's another one. Prohibited weapons order number 3. Any device that is designed to be capable of injuring, immobilizing, or incapacitating a person or animal by discharging an electrical charge produced by means of the application, blah, blah, blah. And it basically anything that could shock somebody that's smaller than 480 millimeters, which there is an imperial measurement, but I'm too lazy to Google that up right now. And this one will probably really piss off people.
Thanks for being a metric asshole.
Sorry. A crossbow or similar device that is designed or altered to be aimed and fired by the action of one hand, whether or not it has been redesigned or subsequently altered to be aimed and fired by the action of both hands, or has a length not exceeding 500 millimeters. In other words, no pistol crossbows. And this one's kind of a personal story because my dad almost got in shit because of this one. So a long time ago, when my father was still alive, he wound up buying a couple crossbows. One, which was a proper normal crossbow. The other, which was a really nice pistol crossbow. And believe it or not, those are legal in New York State. And he had it put to this shop called the Ship It Shop, which allows people to have packages from the United States sent there so that they can go and pick them up and bring them across the border. He decided, wait, let me go ahead and call the CBSA to make sure this is legal. And sure enough, he found out that the pistol crossbow he bought was a prohibited firearm, a prohibited weapon in Canada. So he's like, shit, what am I going to do with this? And it just so happened one of the employees there was really into hunting and that and thought it was a nice little crossbow. So that, you know what, you can have it. Because our government considers that really fucking dangerous for some reason. Which is really dumb when you think about it.
You know what's dangerous? What's dangerous is, in your country, you don't have the right to self-defense.
Oh, yeah.
That's dangerous.
I agree. And then another one. And this one, I'm 100% certain whoever got this first one saw the 5 seconds this thing was included in First Blood Part 2. Rambo First Blood Part 2. The device known as the Constant Companion, being a belt containing a blade capable of being withdrawn from the belt, with the buckle of the belt forming a handle for the blade, and any similar device. You know which scene I'm talking about if you've seen that movie.
Yeah. Come on, guys.
Any knife commonly known as a push dagger.
These aren't weapons people would actually use.
Any knife commonly known as a push dagger that is designed in such a fashion that the handle is placed perpendicular to the main cutting edge of the blade, and any other similar device other than the Aboriginal Ulu knife. Any device having a length less than 30 centimeters, which is a foot, and resembling an innocuous object but designed to conceal a knife or blade, including a device commonly known as the knife comb.
Is the Australian "that's a knife" also listed on the prohibited list?
I'm pretty sure that is a large fixed blade knife, so I don't believe that is a prohibited weapon here.
Yeah.
Anyways,
all right.
Another one. Spiked wristbands are banned. Blowguns are banned here. I'm not making this up. Blowguns are banned here.
Spiked wristbands are banned. So what? Yep. So what are all the goths and the punk rockers supposed to do without their spiked wristbands?
They're wearing 3D printed ones that are made of polymer.
Oh my!
We'll get to that when we get to the brass knuckle portion.
Oh my god!
Yeah, blowguns are banned here. Kyoga batons or steel cobras. I've never even heard of those.
I know what the steel cobra is.
The Morning Star is banned.
Blowguns are banned, right?
Yeah, I just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Being a tube or pipe designed for the purpose of shooting arrows or darts by the breath.
Mm-hmm.
You know how easily I can do that? Get a straw and put a spitball in it. That's
Yeah,
technically a
well,
prohibited weapon by this definition.
I know. Well,
Oh, this one will really piss people off. Brass knuckles are banned here.
well, that's not surprising. Actually, brass knuckles are still banned in some states here in the United States.
Retarded idiots.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, but there actually has been a resurgence of these, but not brass ones, because the definition makes it clear that they have to be metal. So people have just figured, yeah, that's what they've been doing. 3D printed plastic ones. They're not brass knuckles because they're not metal. And it's really funny seeing that. Any electrical or mechanical device that is designed or adapted to operate the trigger mechanism of a semi-automatic firearm for the purpose of causing the firearm to discharge cartridges in rapid succession.
Machine gun.
In other words, this definition is so broad that we pretty much pre-banned bump stocks and any similar device.
And any binary devices and any digit triggers and all that too.
Yep, all that shit is pretty much all. Oh yeah, that also includes our definition of semi-automatic is different than yours. I know for a fact this is our definition up here. I know you guys, the definition for semi-automatic is one shot every pull the trigger. Here it is one pull and release. A single shot is fired.
All right.
In other words, binary triggers were automatically banned because of that definition. Oh yeah, and this one is really dumb. Any rifle, shotgun, or carbine stock of the type known as the bullpup design. In other words, bullpup conversion stocks are prohibited here. Which is ironic because we can get actual bullpup guns here. Like
that is ridiculous.
Tavors, the PS90s, etc. Believe it or not, there are guns here that are, quote, scary weapons that are still legal here. And I'm sure the government's well aware of that. Oh, yeah. The magazine regulations.
All right. Go over the magazine stuff real quick.
Yeah, this is going to be the super quick version. If it is a semi-automatic shotgun or rifle, the limit is 5. If it is a semi-automatic pistol, it is 10 rounds. There are exceptions, though.
No, there is a caveat with the pistols. How long or short can your pistols be?
We'll get to that, and it's mainly it's barrel length that matters for that, not overall size. But anyways, one of the exceptions here for the 5-round limit for semi-auto rifles, M1 Garands. And
so yes, they haven't banned M1 Garands yet, but they want to.
Well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Trudeau thinks it doesn't look scary enough and thinks it's a harmless hunting rifle. I don't know.
Look, the BM59 almost looks exactly like the M1 Garand, just with like a magazine.
Is
the magazine the scary part? Because that's literally the only difference.
Hey, I don't know. I'm not the one that wrote this shit. Also, rimfire semi-auto rifles are exempt from the mag limits. There are other exceptions too. There are caveats to that, and I'll explain one of those in a bit. All right. But there are other ones too. Is of a belt that was manufactured before 1945. So say if you happen to own an MG42, the belt is exempt from the cartridge limitation, which when you really think about it, with modern disintegrating links, this restriction is really dumb.
Well, maybe they're talking about the old Browning belt, cloth belts.
Is of the belt type consisting of a fabric or metal belt, is not a reproduction, and was originally designed or manufactured for the purpose of feeding cartridges of an automatic firearm of a type that was in existence before 1945.
So you can't use a reproduction if it breaks?
That also applies to antique guns too, and I'll explain that in a bit.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there are other ones.
Oh my God. I'm looking at all this and it's like, all right, keep going.
Yeah. And of course, this also includes any firearm that has had its magazine altered, like say with the infamous pins in our magazines, which even that might be. Oh yeah, here's another one. The upper receiver of any firearm referred to in item 87 of part 1 of the schedule. If you remember, without having to scroll back up, that's the AR-15s. Because prior to the ban, people would not shut the fuck up about telling people to keep their upper receivers. The government got wind of that and decided, yeah, we're just going to ban the upper receivers of AR-15s while we're at it.
Couldn't you just disassemble the upper receiver and just give them the upper or lower receiver and tell them to...
Technically, yes, but they haven't set up the terms of the buyback program yet, or even a grandfathering scheme. So again, yeah. Oh yeah, there's also prohibited ammunition. Some of this may sound familiar to you guys. The first one is armor-piercing handgun ammo, and they make it specifically clear for the 5.7 cartridge.
Yeah, because the 5.7 is such a powerful cartridge.
It's funny you mention that because 5.7 firearms are in fact legal to own here. We just can't have the military rounds for it. Which are, quote, armor piercing.
That's hilarious.
Also, anything that is designed to ignite on impact. So incendiary cartridges, from video games. They exist, I know. Oh, exploding on impact too, which that definition alone pretty much banned a lot of the explosive projectiles for grenade launchers. And it even includes that here, exceeding 15 millimeters in diameter in conjunction with that. Any cartridge that is, flechettes are banned here.
Flechettes, all right.
Yeah, and that's the entire prohibited list as it is currently. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the screen sharing.
Okay, so where do we go next?
I think where we should go next is a very quick, brief history of what we started with as early as 1934 when you guys had the National Firearms Act all the way to the present day. And I'll go through it as briefly as possible. I might even share the screen for this again because I actually have a list here.
Unless you have to, don't do it. Don't screen share.
Okay.
All right. Because we're running out of time. Okay. Because Roll Call wants me to make it his show tonight, so we're gonna have to rush through this.
All right. 1934, handguns were registered. There were some other laws prior to that, but they really aren't relevant to this. But to put it bluntly, we've had a handgun registration since 1934. There's other stuff in between then and the next major change, and that next major change was 1968. That's when that's when their classifications ended. Came into effect, and that included machine guns and shit like that. At this time, machine guns were still legal, and you could own them. 1976, and that included 1976 full autos were banned, and the grandfathering them happened in 1978. And at that time, people could either grandfather them in, turn them in for destruction, or convert them to semi-automatic. That one will come back later. 1977, there was a bunch of stuff there, but one of the things was it included the earliest form of licensing that Canada had, the Firearms Acquisition Certificate. It's very similar to the PAL. The big difference is you only needed this to acquire firearms. You did not need this to possess them.
Okay. Much
like, say, the pistol purchasing permits that a lot of states have. There's some other stuff too, but it's not really relevant for this. But
yeah, but with the law of states, it's usually most of the pistol purchase permits is usually per pistol.
Mm-hmm.
So it's situational instead of you have to have one for everything you buy. It's if you're going to buy one, you got to get that permit.
Then fast forward ahead to 1991, where they passed much stricter requirements for the FAC, including many of the stuff we just went over first came into effect for this.
Right.
For the FACs rather than the PALs. They also redefined prohibited and restricted firearms and weapons. They also applied the safe storage. Oh, yeah, we didn't even get to that yet, the fucking storage and transport shit. But I'll make that section super duper brief. And a bunch of prohibited stuff, including the magazine bans and shit like that. Then in 1995, the biggest change happened. The Firearms Act came into effect. And there's a bunch of stuff, but the most important relevance of this is the FAC got turned into the PAL, where you had to have a license to possess it. There was also a possession-only license where you couldn't buy firearms with it.
Is that when you got the long gun ban? Or the long gun registration?
And that's what I was about to ask next. In 1995, the long gun registry for rifles and shotguns or any firearm in a non-restricted class came into effect. And that stayed in effect until 2012. And in that time, they had made changes to it, including dropping fees, making it mandatory, making it a criminal offense to have a firearm without a registration certificate, blah, blah, blah. 2012, the Long Gun Registry Act was removed, and the registration records were supposed to be destroyed.
Did they destroy them, though?
No. They did not. And that was because of a bunch of BS, including illegal stuff, but that's another discussion for another time. Then in 2015, they passed another piece of legislation, the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act, where they basically loosened some of the gun laws.
I need to make a footnote here for everyone. Remember, when some liberal says common sense gun control, they mean anything but common sense.
It's funny you mentioned that because they only called it this because it was actually a conservative government loosening our gun laws. So yeah, anyways. But the point was it changed the transport requirements for certain guns, and that was the last time we ever had a government that reduced the BS we have to do this. Then 2018, Bill C-71 went into effect, which strengthened some other shit, and then which only some of it's starting to come into effect now, and then as of 2020, the OIC happened.
Which is the, Trudeau's...
The current ban.
Trudeau's, gun crisis.
The one which has made my AR-15 a safe queen, where I am not even sure if I'm going to be able to still keep it at this rate. And believe me, I would love to say I lost it in a boating accident. The problem is, at the time they were banned, all AR-15s were registered because they were restricted by name firearms. Meaning the government knows I have them. What's the saying everyone likes to say? Registration leads to confiscation. Always.
Always. But here's the thing. I was watching something. They said, if you don't want to get rid of it, you had to register your restrictive guns.
There was a bit of a thing there because some of the guns banned.
But again, they said they weren't doing another long gun ban. But by requiring someone to register your restricted guns, you essentially are making a de facto long gun registry.
All right, so let me clarify that. When this ban happened, many of the guns in this class were either restricted class, which already were required to be registered to begin with, or non-restricted, where they were not required to be registered by this point. So when they were banned and the government was floating around a grandfathering idea, the idea was if you had these guns that were non-restricted, you were expected to re-register them. That has yet to come into force because of the simple fact that they haven't even passed legislation concerning a grandfathering period or even a buyback program yet. And we're still in legal limbo otherwise until then. The only thing protecting me from the RCMP barging down my door and shoving C8 rifles in my face is the fact that I'm under a, quote, legal amnesty that lasts until April 2022, where I am not able to be charged for possessing these prohibited firearms until further notice.
Okay. All right. So where do we go from here? What's next?
Transport, because I want to get this one really quick and out of the way, but one of the things that I didn't really get to touch on was that there's a reason they split the different firearms into different classes. And part of that is they each have differing transportation and storage laws. We have mandatory safe storage laws of firearms here. In other words,
so you have to have a safe or security cabinet and have it locked at all times.
It's actually a bit more complicated than that, but essentially yes. And depending on the class of firearm you have, you may even have to go farther than that.
Oh my God!
I'll give you the super brief version of the storage. Non-restricted. It's the bare minimum. And for those firearms, the bare minimum required is either in all circumstances, you cannot store a loaded firearm. I want to make that clear.
Okay.
Because for all classes of firearm, you cannot store or transport them loaded. There is an exception for muzzle loaders during hunting season, but that one doesn't particularly matter for this. You cannot store it loaded, obviously. For non-restricted, which is most rifles and shotguns, you can either put a trigger lock on it, put a cable lock through the action, lock it into a safe or something like that, or you can remove the bolt. So say you got a Remington 700 and you pop the bolt off of it and put the bolt somewhere else. That's considered legally stored, bare minimum.
Really?
Yeah, really. Trust me, I wish it was this lenient for the other classes. Restricted firearms, which is mostly handguns, you have to have, like, the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum. Obviously, the gun has to be unloaded, either a trigger lock or cable lock on the gun, and that gun, locked as is, put in a case and locked.
That seems a little bit overboard.
To give you an idea of how crazy that is, even California doesn't go that far.
And no, that's why I said it's overboard.
But yeah, then that's the same thing for transporting a restricted. If you want to transport a restricted firearm, you have to do the same thing alongside the authorization to transport shit, which for prohibs is the same thing with the exception of machine guns, where the machine guns, you have to do all of that and then remove the bolt and lock it separately. For a machine gun. So say if you're one of the lucky bastards that has a 12.2 prohib license, which doesn't really matter because you can't shoot them anyway, and you want to transport it anywhere, you have in a case, you have to do that.
So those prohibited firearms that you have to apply for a license, and if you are lucky enough to get one and own one of those machine guns, you can't use it. You can just have it, transport it, and make it look pretty. And
in fully functional state, yes. And
so
that's
you can never
that's
fire it whatsoever.
That's for the prohib subclasses. With the there are several prohib subclasses. The first was the machine guns, 12.2. Second was converted autos, and that was in 1991, where if you had a machine gun that was converted to be semi-automatic only, that was now a prohibited firearm. Yeah, I don't get the logic behind it either. The idea, basically, they were scared that people could convert them back into full autos again, which is really dumb when you think about it. But
it's really hard once you convert to semi-auto.
But yeah, that was the idea. Then there was the 12.4 ban, 12.5 ban. That's the stuff that was on the list that we had explained. Then one of the things they changed was the definition of what a prohibited handgun is, because at the time, all handguns were restricted class, but then they changed that definition to the following: any handgun with a barrel 105 millimeters or less, which for context, a Glock 19's stock barrel that is not threaded is under this limit. And it would be a prohibited handgun if the barrel length was 105 millimeters or less, or if it was chambered in a 25 or
hold on, give that to me in inches, because I'm not
1 inches.
4.1.
That's a rough equivalent, but to put it bluntly, if you have a Glock 19 with a normal size barrel that isn't threaded or extended, then yeah, which is 102 millimeters in metric.
You mean like one of these?
Yeah. If you have a handgun with that barrel in it, that's prohibited. Hell, that barrel is a prohibited device under that definition.
I've got a prohibited Canadian device right here.
Yes. And yes, that includes suppressors and higher cap mags.
And yes, it is a Glock bag. Glock 19.
But yeah, and subsequently, our Glock 19s have a slightly extended barrel.
It's
really
ridiculous.
Oh, it is. But there's another one that's even worse, and this one may coincide with the GCA of 1968, because up here in Canada, if you have a handgun that is chambered in 25 or 32 caliber, doesn't even matter a specific cartridge. If it's a caliber 32 or 25 caliber, it is a prohibited firearm. So say you got something in 32 H&R Magnum, that's a prohibited handgun, regardless of barrel length. The idea behind that was they were trying to ban the Saturday night specials, that were chambered in 25 ACP, 32
not the Saturday
ACP.
night specials. Come on, not my ROMs. Not my Jimenez.
But they wound up banning a shitload of other guns too, because of the broad definition. Because of the broad definition of caliber instead of the specific cartridge.
So they banned them all.
Yeah, and people who have that class 12.6, they're the only prohibited subclass that is still allowed to take them to the range and use them.
Okay, so what guns are we talking in class 6?
12.6. All handguns of a barrel length under 105 millimeters or less, and any handguns chambered in 25 or 32 caliber.
So literally antiques.
As well as any handgun with a barrel 4 inches.
Most handguns these days are not made in 25.
Oh yeah, 32. Exactly. But at the time they were wanting to ban
literally antique autos or semi-autos.
Yes, they effectively went after those two. But
that's ridiculous.
And then after that, the most recent prohib subclass, if it was to be created, would include the guns that were just banned. Because 12.6 was the last prohib subclass until this ban happened with the Order in Council.
Okay, so I think we pretty much covered everything.
There is one last thing, and it is very brief, and I will make this as brief as possible.
Okay.
But let's say I know a lot of you watching are American citizens, and you either live on private property or somewhere like state forest or friend's property that you could go to and shoot, and no one bats an eye.
Some of us own farms, which would be out in the county, and we're allowed to shoot on those lands because it's private property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if I told you that here in Canada, because of the way our firearms laws are written, if you have a restricted or prohibited firearm, you cannot shoot those anywhere except for an approved range, or in the case of prohibited firearms other than 12.6, you can't shoot them, period.
I would not be surprised, as I already know that for a fact.
Yeah, because in my case, if I wanted to go out in the bush, the same buddy's property, and shoot my handguns, I would be breaking the law. If I got caught doing that, I would be thrown in prison.
Well,
but yet if I shoot
hold on. Keyword there. If you got caught.
I'm not going to say anything, but I will say this. There are definitely people in the more rural parts of this country who don't give a shit and do it anyway. But you won't catch anyone admitting that.
But you won't catch anyone admitting that, one. And two, if the authorities haven't caught them, or they don't know that.
Yeah, but also it's because of the fact that, in my opinion, of all the stupid BS we have to put up with, the fact that is a crime is the stupidest thing.
That is... You guys don't have any rights there. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, we don't. When it comes
to
guns.
No rights whatsoever. Because if they tell you what you can and can't do on your own property, then it's not your own property.
Yeah, we've never had property rights in this country.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it is. And
okay, so what else?
That about covers all the major topics. But I will say this though, in my case, if I want to shoot my handguns that are restricted class firearms, I can only shoot them at a gun club or a shooting range. And I am a member of a range, so that isn't a problem. But I just find it so dumb that I know people who out in the back 40 who, have land and they shoot guns on their property. But God forbid if you shoot a handgun there and get caught, it'd be a crime to do so.
I mean, I'm almost ready to get my guns and the pitchforks and the torches and go up there and get your nunchucks back because that's ridiculous. You guys
I
should
agree.
at least be able to own nunchucks.
Like, for fuck's sake, you can make the damn things easier than it would be to buy them.
Can you own katanas up there?
Long swords. Yes. Fortunately, yes. Those are legal here.
Well, then what? Literally, a nunchuck is just wood with like a chain or a rope.
I could make a fucking nunchuck. That's the stupidity of it.
Katana is more deadly than a nunchuck. A nunchuck, not really.
And yeah, I do in fact own a katana. It's mainly a wall decorative piece, but the one I got, I ensured was actually one that was functional. But yeah, but here's another thing. Firearms deactivation. I don't know if this is really a thing down in the United States, but here it is totally legal to own firearms if they have been deactivated in such a way they can never again legally be a firearm. And I do in fact have a firearm like this.
There are ways to deactivate them and whatnot and get them and whatnot. There's a procedure where you can have them, but again, it's like we're America. What do we need that for? The only reason you do that is if maybe grandpappy brought a gun back from the war, didn't register it, and you'd have to get it deactivated or turn it into a museum or the ATF just so you wouldn't get arrested.
Well, in this case, I have a deactivated AK-74 Select Fire, and they had to do a bunch of stuff to it in order to make it non-functional. And I bought it that way because at the time, I figured that's the only way I'm ever going to get an AK legally in this country. And
you've got to immigrate to the United States.
Oh, believe me, that's easier said than done. Well, unless I want to do it illegally.
I know, but I know a couple Canadians that came over here and just said, I don't care anyways. But,
anyways. But
that's Canada.
That is an option for the guns I have that are prohibited, but I really don't want my AR-15s to suffer the same fate as the AK-74.
I know you're probably not religious, but at this point, your best bet is to pray.
Yeah, I don't blame you for saying that.
I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm not saying that to be condescending. I'm just saying that with the options laid out in front of you, that's kind of your only option at this point, unless unless the miracle happens at this point.
Oh yeah.
I mean, have you heard that they're actually trying to bring back the woolly mammoths, genetic engineering?
Yeah, over in Russia, yeah. I'm aware of that.
Yeah. So now, considering they banned all your elephant guns, what are you going to hunt woolly mammoths with?
500 Nitro Express or less. We still have those here at least.
That's not going to be very effective against woolly mammoths.
You'd be surprised what a 500 Nitro can kill. But anyways, point being is that I do agree that because it only banned those by technicality. Also, speaking of technicalities, the 20mm ban also inadvertently, someone brought up a point when it first came about that some lawyers came up like, hey, doesn't that technically include shotguns with their chokes removed? Because they never clearly defined what bore meant.
Slugs, yeah.
Well, it's because, here's the thing, they never clearly defined what bore means. And that's something I want to make clear is that our storage laws actually include a lot of stuff where they mention stuff like a safe or shit like that, but they never define what it is. And there was actually a case law, a very important case law that happened in Ontario in 2011, R versus Harry Barnes. Where, long story short, the guy was grandfathered to own machine guns. RCMP raided his house for unrelated reasons, and they found his guns in a stack-on locker and a school locker, fully assembled with no other locks or any shit on them, and then they charged him with unsafe storage. Blah, 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 blah. Lawyers bring up the defense that, hey, they never clearly defined what a safe is under the Firearms Act because it made it clear that in the storage definition that a safe, you didn't have to have your machine gun with a trigger lock or the bolt removed and locked separately. And the judge agreed with that and looked up the definition, and the definition was in this one legal text they use, any metal container that has a secure locking mechanism, any six-sided opaque metal container with a secure locking mechanism. And the defense agreed that both the school locker and the stack-on had a secure locking mechanism, and therefore the guy was acquitted of the storage charge. And it set the definition until a higher court overturns it of what a safe legally is in this country.
I don't think they're going to overturn it because that's just too much trouble.
Well, not yet anyways.
Well, you're right. With Trudeau, anything's possible.
Yeah, but the point being was that there are portions of our law that are fucking crucial to understand and have definitions that they very frequently stress, but then they don't actually provide a definition for what that is, and that you have to rely on case law for it.
All right. So with all that in mind, okay, we've gone over most of the laws, the important ones, right?
Yeah. There might be one or two minor ones. I did. There was one. Transport permits. And this relates. So one of the things with restricted and prohibited firearms, if I wanted to say go to and from the range, aside from the stuff that is currently in place where I have the ATT attached to my firearms license as a condition, I would have to request a transport permit.
Is that every time you take them to the range, or is that
there are two types of ATTs?
You have to apply for it for a year or whatnot, or
there are two types of transport permits, and they're called authorization to transports. There is the short-term authorization to transports and the long-term. Prior to putting the certain transport situations as conditions on our firearms license in 2015 and repeal of many of those in 2019 in recent months, you had to apply for a long-term ATT. So say, for example, you were a member of a gun club and you want to go here to shoot all your restricted guns. You would have to call this Canadian Firearms Program, the RCMP, and request a long-term authorization to transport in order to transport all your guns to and from there between specific times. A short-term one is one you would call on an incidental, and I've actually had to call in one of those. I had bought a Smith & Wesson SD9VE. You probably are familiar with what that handgun is. And I bought it used from a guy just across the border in a different province. And because it was an interprovincial sale, I had to request a separate ATT for it, and I had to call it in. And I could not go and legally transport that gun home, even with the registration approval, until I had that ATT. Once I got the ATT, which fortunately it wasn't very hard for this specific instance, but I can imagine others having a real pain in the ass time.
Right.
I could then go grab the gun and then bring it back. And normally that also specifies the date and time, but they were quite lenient with me and gave me a 48-hour period in order to do it, which I did it the second I got it. And I contacted the owner, told him, hey, I'm going to be coming right now. I was able to get the ATT today. Got it, brought it back home. But the thing with that is, if you happen to stop anywhere that isn't the destination, either to or from, that is considered a crime.
Well, so you can't grab food at the drive-thru on the way home?
Technically, no. It would be a crime.
That's stupid.
I don't know how to tell you this, but good luck enforcing that. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, right.
But anyways, the point being is that it's very draconian. And let's put it this way. To give you an idea of how draconian this is, I have a friend of mine who lives in Australia. And when I told him about what the ATT system was, he was absolutely floored.
Yeah.
And believe it or not,
Australian gun laws are just as bad.
Oh, yeah, even worse, actually, I would argue. Because at least here in Canada, I can
now, Australia is even worse because Australia has become literally the definition of 1984 with the COVID.
Oh, I am well aware of that. But just under gun laws specifically, their gun laws, we look like insert the name of a really free U.S. state here when it comes to gun laws. We look like them in comparison to Australia with how much BS they have.
I'm gonna use just okay. You've got Montana, so you're closer to Montana, whereas Australia is closer to California, New York, or Hawaii.
Even California is better than Australia. Straight up.
I know, but I'm saying on the restriction side, there's states you really don't want to live in if you like guns.
But yeah, but my friend in Australia, believe it or not, they can in fact own handguns there, with their laws being very similar to ours, but they do not have transport permits like what we do here in Canada, which really surprised him. Which, yeah, get that through your head. A country which doesn't allow people to own pump-action shotguns for hunting, yet they're okay with people owning handguns for target shooting.
Yeah.
Really think about that.
So.
This is the same country that freaked out when someone started importing a lever-action shotgun.
Right.
And they were treating them like AR-15s.
So, all right. So, we got a couple more questions, and then if anybody has any questions out there on the YouTube side, we'll go over those. So remember to @NightStrike if you have a question for Canuck GunNut, or send in a super chat with the question. All right. So, all right. With all that news, old stuff and new stuff, those laws that are in place. What major gun rights advocacy group do you have in Canada?
There are 3, with the current most active one being the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, the CCFR. They're the most active one right now. Followed after them is the...
Okay.
Followed after them is the National Firearms Association, which yes is the NFA. So here in Canada, if you mention to a gun guy NFA, they don't think National Firearms Act of 1934. They think National Firearms Association
because they're Canadian. That's different.
And because of their, as far as how they view things and how they've done things, I'd say they're pretty much the closest to the NRA, because just like the NRA, they're kind of fucking useless. And I was briefly a member of them for a few years, but when the CCFR came out and started actually doing shit and was doing it well and actually succeeding, I started supporting them, and I'm never going back. Because ever since the CCFR came about, the NFA has been piggybacking on everything they do and trying to claim that they're the ones doing all the heroic lobbying efforts.
I would. This is my personal opinion, being an American, obviously. But I would say that the CCFR is closer to the gun owners of America here in the United States.
I would agree with that, based on how they've been doing things.
Because GOA has been, they've been, them partnering with some of these other smaller groups, like Firearms Policy Coalition, and the Second Amendment Foundation. They've been knocking wins. They've been knocking out wins.
Oh yeah, like I have to give them credit where credit's due.
That's a weird thing. A lot of these smaller groups here in the United States, other than the NRA, a lot of these smaller groups, when they do either they do separate lawsuits to fight some of the anti-gun stuff, and sometimes they just go all in and partner to go after it too. I mean, does that happen in Canada, or is it you literally just each group just fights at it?
It's funny you mention that, because that actually has been happening here. Because right now the CCFR, they have been in the process of suing the government because of the OIC, arguing that the government using the order and council system to ban those firearms is blatantly unconstitutional. And they've combined their case with a couple smaller orgs, but none of them But yeah, the CCFR is the most active one right now, and as far as I'm concerned, they've made the most progress of any of the pro-gun groups here. And there is one other group, the Canadian Sports Shooting Association.
Canadian Sports Shooting Association. Yeah, I've heard of them. I'm going to throw the links out for the CCFR out there in the chat for you guys. I'm also going to put it in the description of the video after we're done here. So there's also their YouTube channel, which they do a radio show on their YouTube channel, right?
Oh yeah, their radio show is fantastic. They usually
I've listened to it. Honestly, I've listened to some of the radio stuff, and it's like most of the stuff, I could agree with. Even though I'm an American, most of the stuff I can get behind.
And you'd probably heard the voices of Rod Giltaca and Tracy Wilson, the two lead people behind the organization.
Right. So because I was watching it earlier today, just so I'd be informed on following along with you, and it's just like, wow, it sounds exactly like listening to the United States sometimes. I understand that Canadian English and American English are very close, but I'm just saying, just like the situational stuff, it sounds oddly familiar.
And yeah, I will say this much: there are definitely a lot more Canadians here who support less strict gun laws than some people would have you believe. There are definitely people here trying to fight the good fight,
right?
And that includes people within certain organizations that happen to enforce law as well as military. I won't say anything specific because it's technically not really something we're supposed to do, but yeah. But yeah, I'll leave it this much though. There are definitely people here, especially out in Alberta. Oh boy, if our gun laws worked like how you guys did, and each province was able to dictate their own gun laws, Alberta would be the most liberal of all the gun laws. And by liberal, I mean the most free and lenient of them all.
You mean actually technically you'd be conservative instead of liberal.
Well, I say liberal as in the actual classic use of the term in favor of more.
The problem is here in the United States, liberal means the exact opposite.
I know, and it's technically the same thing here too. I'm just using the
I would say you'd be the most libertarian.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. The most libertarian when it comes to guns. Alberta would be that province.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of pro-gun people out there.
Because less government intervention, just let us do what we want with what we've got and leave us alone.
And that's definitely the way they've been trying to do things for a while now.
Liberal here in the United States means Democrat, means opposite of the actual definition of the word, unfortunately. And it's
here,
been like that
here liberal means the Liberal Party of Canada, who have been the party that has done the most damage. Over. Yeah, and that includes the current government being led by Justin Trudeau. He's leader of the Liberal Party, and his government is the reason why we're in this shit right now with the AR-15s and that, which in my opinion was completely unjust because he tried to use the actions of a man who didn't have a firearms license, was a known criminal and psychopath who illegally acquired his... And one of them was stolen. When he committed his mass shooting, he stole the sidearm of an RCMP officer he murdered, but the remainder of his guns he had managed to smuggle from the United States, and those firearms themselves being stolen or straw bought from within the United States. In other words,
they were acquired illegally regardless.
Yes, exactly.
So they weren't legal in the first place.
Exactly. And people had reported him as being a complete psycho 5 years before this happened, and that included abusing his girlfriend. Yeah, and they knew he had guns too because they made it clear that this guy has illegal guns. He's abusing his girlfriend. He's a fucking lunatic. And they went and were like, well, no, read it. There is a thing that is going around where people claim that there is evidence that suggests this guy may have been an RCMP informant prior to this, but that is something that is a discussion for another day.
Okay. All right. So we're going to get into some of the more interesting questions this evening. Okay. Serious question. What is the deal with Tim Hortons? I know it's a donut shop. I know they have good coffee. What the hell?
Basically, Tim Hortons here is by far the largest coffee donut shop chain up here, and then it's named after a very famous Canadian hockey player by the name of Tim Horton. It was founded in 1964, and ever since then,
does he have a share of it or something?
Well, his estate has a share of it.
Okay.
Although nowadays it's owned by the same company that owns Burger King. So take that what you will.
Is it the same company?
Yes, the same company that owns Burger King.
Is it the same one down here?
Yes, the same.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm just making sure because sometimes it's owned and separate because because of countries and what laws and whatnot.
Prior to that, it was owned by the same company that owned Wendy's. And then prior to that, it was an independent company. I don't know the exact details, but to put it bluntly, Tim Hortons nowadays is only Canadian because of its history. The actual owners are American now.
Right. Okay. All right. So, all right. Here's the next one. What's the deal with poutine?
Poutine is a dish that is best described as French fries and cheese curds with gravy poured on them. And it's a dish that originates from the French-speaking province of Quebec.
It does not look appealing or tasty if you look at it in pictures, but apparently it's very delicious if you actually eat it.
Yeah, it is. Depending on who makes it, it can definitely be very good, but there is such a thing as bad poutine. But yeah, assuming everything's right, it is a very tasty and very greasy food, and it is good.
You know what? We're just gonna get this out of the way. Maple syrup. Okay, we know Canada. You've got the maple leaf on your flag.
Which, by the way, that we've only had the maple leaf flag since 1965. Prior to that, it was the red ensign.
I know. I understand that. But you've got the maple leaf. So what's the deal with maple syrup?
Maple syrup is, as the name implies, it is basically syrup made from the sap of maple trees. And the way they harvest it is they quite literally have this device that punches into the tree and slowly drains the sap out of the tree. Then they harvest that sap and then do whatever with it. And it's very tasty.
Instead, you know how I'm going to explain this for some of the viewers. You know how pine trees always emit sap and whatnot. The maple tree does something similar, but you can use a device that actually drain the sap, and you can actually just add sugar to that sap, and that's your maple syrup right there. You put on the cake.
Oh yeah, it is very tasty stuff, and there's
a little bit more to it to process it, but more or less.
Yeah, exactly. I'm no expert on that subject matter, but let's put it this way: the final result is really tasty.
Okay, so it is that you just drain it from the tree, literally.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, and before we get into some of the YouTube comment questions, okay? All right. This is for you, and this is from your Canadian perspective. I have to have this so everyone knows where you or Canadians stand on this issue. All right, you ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Is a hot dog a sandwich or not?
I'm going to be completely honest. I've never had that discussion with people up here. We just see hot dogs as their own thing.
I know. And for the longest time, I just saw a hot dog as just a hot dog. But then people started asking the hard questions. Is it a sandwich or is it not?
I can see the arguments for both sides, but if I had to pick a side, not a sandwich. It's its own thing.
Okay. All right. You heard it.
But that's just me personally. I don't speak for all Canadians, so I'm sure there's people that think differently. But in my opinion, it is not a sandwich.
All right. So you heard it. This Canadian doesn't think that a hot dog is a sandwich. Okay. All right. All right. Let's get to some of the user questions. So, guys, if you've at Night Strike, I'm going to go through the list because I've got the whole list here. So, let's see. All right. It says, Scott said something first, I believe. What does it say? So Scott79 said, at Night Strike, did the Canadian military copy the U.S. Marines camo pattern?
No, I would argue it was the other way around because CADPAT was first introduced in the, I believe it was the late 90s, early 2000s, long before the Marine Corps ever adopted MARPAT. And Canada was one of the earliest nations to adopt a digital pattern camouflage. And it's been very influential. So, it's the other way around, not MARPAT, not CADPAT ripping off MARPAT.
Okay.
CADPAT came first.
All right. Black Bear Forge has a question. He says, what is it? At Night Strike, how hard is it to open a gun shop in Canada?
Good question, actually. I'm going to be totally honest. I don't have any experience in the firearms business side of things, but I do know if you wish to open a gun shop in this country, you need to apply for a firearms business license directly from the Chief Firearms Office, and from there you have to do a whole bunch of other things. And then once you have that business license, then you can just operate it however, as long as you comply with the CFO's orders and shit like that.
Okay, and they used to do it over here in the United States, like they do up in Canada, where we didn't always have gun stores. Sometimes it was the local hardware store or the local gas station, in some rural areas here in the United States.
Oh, that's still the case up here.
But I hear that's still the case up there. You still have the old style up there. You have normal gun shops too, but you also have hardware stores and gas stations that still sell guns, right?
Like, I'll give you an example. The gun shop that I go to most frequently in my area, it's also a fence hardware store. And they sell all sorts of stuff relating to fence building and stuff like that, in addition to firearms and hunting and fishing supplies. And then there's a gun shop that actually got featured on, I believe the channel was called Funker 350, where they decided to make a little comedic skit where they claimed that we're Canadians visiting a gun shop in Kentucky that's out of a gas station. Plot twist, it was actually Canada. And yes, there is in fact a gun shop in Pembroke, Ontario that is based out of a gas station. A fully operational gas station that just happens to have a gun shop.
Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna add. I got another question here. I'm gonna throw this out for you so everyone knows. So we didn't go over this specifically, but the RCMP is like what, a mixture between the FBI and the ATF over there in Canada, right?
Technically, yeah, they'd be the closest comparison, but they would also incorporate a lot of the DEA and Homeland Security. Well, not Homeland Security, that's their own thing, and Border Patrol, the civil U.S. Border Patrol, because
so they pretty much just throw all those groups into one group and say, here, go do this.
They also do a lot of local and provincial level policing, depending on province. Because unlike the United States, when it comes to law enforcement, here in Canada, unless they state otherwise, the default policing option is RCMP. So say out west, there are a lot of municipalities that don't feel like they need or can afford their own police force. So the RCMP does the policing for them. While on other areas, like say in my province, there's not only a provincial level police force, the Ontario Provincial Police, there are also municipalities rich enough that they can have their own police departments and don't require the RCMP to police for them. But the only provinces that have their own police force are Ontario and Quebec. Although Alberta, I hear, is in the process of establishing their own proper provincial police force.
But you do still have like local city police forces.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right. But I'm pretty sure the United States is one of the few countries left that still has sheriffs, right?
There is technically a quote sheriff's department in Alberta, but they're more of a highway traffic enforcement agency.
So like a highway patrol.
Yeah, not really a true sheriff. And I imagine that if Alberta actually does succeed in getting its own provincial police force, that they will be included in it and that they will get absorbed into it. I can see that happening.
Because I know some other older British Commonwealth nations, some of them at one point had sheriffs and they got rid of them. And the United States is the only country left that I'm still aware of that still uses sheriffs. So I figured I'd ask, the United States being former colonies and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We got a super chat out there from Gun Library Garrett. He gives us $4 and gives us the sticker cup of coffee. All right. Cup of coffee. All right. So that goes along with the Tim Hortons. So is there anything else we didn't ask? Is there anything else? Guys, you got Warsaw's asking this. He's like, here's a question. The biggest gun trafficking raid the RCMP has done. Criminals I'm talking about. And has the RCMP ever worked with both the FBI and ATF?
First question, I don't know what the biggest RCMP raid is, but I can, concerning firearms trafficking, but I can tell you the biggest one that I am aware of. And that would be actually one fairly local to me, where a couple years ago, they caught this guy crossing the border, and he had 60 plus new in the box prohibited class handguns, and was going to, when the destination was Toronto, to sell them to the gang members there. Yes, there is a black market for firearms here, and the criminals here take full advantage of it.
Big surprise. There's a black market everywhere.
And of the
That's
black
why
market
it's called
guns,
the black market.
When it comes to black market guns in Canada, the overwhelming majority of them are smuggled in from the United States, while a smaller portion of them are stolen or straw bought, with the former being far more common than the latter. And it's crazy when it comes to that. As for the second question, whether they've worked with the FBI or ATF, absolutely. They absolutely do that all the time. They cooperate with U.S. law enforcement agencies constantly. It's one of the things they frequently do. Like, heck, in my area, it is not uncommon for them to deal with ATF and FBI agents around here, depending on what kind of operations they're doing. Because in my specific region, which the closest American portion would be the upstate New York section along the St. Lawrence River, there is enough smuggling that happens around here that they require the cooperation of as many law enforcement agencies as possible in order to try and stop that, which includes on the Canadian side the RCMP, the OPP, and municipal police, while in the United States it'd be the FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. Border Patrol, etc.
Okay, we got one more question from Warsaw, and then we're gonna have to wrap this up. But Warsaw asks. Now, he said, here's a question. What are the chances of illegal smuggled guns coming from Chicago, New York, into Canada?
For Chicago, very little, I would say. And that's mainly because Chicago itself is a massive destination for black market firearms. I'm sure it's happened, but it's very unlikely. New York, on the other hand, the vast majority of guns in this province that are smuggled, they go through New York State, specifically this area. So straight up, there are definitely guns smuggled through New York State.
All right. What about from Detroit?
Detroit? I would say that's also fairly common too, because Detroit is right across the border from another major Canadian city, Windsor, Ontario. And there have definitely been lots of documented instances of people trying to smuggle guns from Detroit to Windsor. One particularly hilarious case involved a woman with 7 or 8 handguns and plastic baggies in the gas tank of her car. I'm not joking. They actually found this woman, arrested her, and they confiscated the guns. And she was smuggling them through by hiding them in the gas tank. How does one even do that?
Well, they figured out a way to reseal the gas tank. That's how.
Well, obviously, but yeah, they take firearms smuggling very seriously here, or they should, because it is a significant source of crime guns in this country. To the point where the vast overwhelming majority of people convicted of firearm crimes don't even have a firearm license. Seriously, if you actually go into Toronto's Facebook page, like the Toronto Police Department's Facebook page, which is our Chicago essentially when it comes to gun deaths, they constantly use the Toronto gang shootings as excuses to pass stricter gun laws or shit like that.
Right.
Almost every single time they arrest someone and seize firearms from them, they don't have a gun license, and they more than likely already have firearms prohibitions ordered against them.
It's messed up, man. It's messed up.
Oh, yeah, it is. And yet they still blame the legal license law-abiding owners for the gang members that laugh at all this gun control shit.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up the Hit or Miss special edition Through the Looking Glass interview with the Canadian. So,
my pleasure.
So, guys, we're about wrapping it up. Does anybody have any final comments or questions for Canuck GunNut before we stick a fork in her and say she's done? Before the fat lady sings. I'll give you guys about a minute before we wrap it up. We slow it down and wrap it up. But yeah, I thought we had a productive chat this evening.
I would think so too.
You know, I thought we had a really good conversation. I'm glad you went over everything. Yeah, you may have gone a little fast, but again, you were, everything. At least I'm informed now.
I can clarify some things later on as well.
I mean, if you guys want us to do another one of these, insight on Canadian gun laws, or pertaining to Canada, let me know. Either email me, make a comment in the comments below with this video, and we'll try and go over again. But so, but that's it. Okay, Warsaw, we're not gonna go over that. I don't even think they had prohibition in Canada when we had prohibition.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because when you guys had the alcohol prohibition, we never did. Yeah. And as a result, it was very common for alcohol to get smuggled from Canada to the United States. That was a really common thing up here.
Yeah.
It's also why every time I watch The Untouchables, I cannot watch it as soon as the sequence comes up where they have that cross-border shootout where the RCMP is shooting at them, because in real life, they would have just been like, yeah, not our problem.
Yeah, it's like my great-great-aunt lived 2 blocks down from Al Capone in Chicago. So,
oh boy,
that's how it was. But yeah, it's hilarious things. But all right, I guess that's it. So, nope, we're finishing up Mr. FNH. If you need to go back and check the replay, we went over a lot of Canadian stuff, because I wanted everyone to get an insight of how bad. That's why I called this Through the Looking Glass, because technically, whether you agree or not, the Canadians are the closest cousins we Americans have, as far as insight, in laws and common ancestry.
And that's true for us as well.
So it's just like, if you look at all, we see everything that's happening to Canada, and the reason why I say Through the Looking Glass, because if we don't keep on top of what's going on here in the United States, then what's happening to Canada may come our way. And I don't want that to happen. So I want everyone to be informed of what's going on with our cousins up in Canada.
Yeah.
All right.
And I would agree with that. And I tell people the same thing in other countries. You'd be surprised how similar a lot of these countries were prior to their gun laws.
The only thing that is keeping us afloat here in the United States is the fact that our government is founded on that our founding charter, Constitution,
your Bill of Rights.
No, it's not that's not the Bill of Rights. The founding document of our country, which is normally a charter or a constitution, or another. It's called something else, But what is it? Confederation, Articles of Confederation, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but the fact is, because we've got it in our Constitution, we have a right to it. But not everybody and not every country has that. Though some countries are starting to adopt it little by little. With the case of the Czech Republic, because you heard about that too, right?
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard about that, and good for them. Good for them.
And
they have a strong.
Who knows? One day, Canuck GunNut, maybe you guys will get lucky. Maybe they'll decide to add that, amend your founding charter to amend it. Again, yes, that's a pipe dream, that's a miracle dream. But who knows? Who knows? Keep trying, I guess.
Yeah.
But
it would be nice though.
Brazil and Poland are also looking at that too. So as far as the Second Amendment, so it's just it's coming around to other countries as well. But we've had it for so long in this country that if we don't keep on top of it, keep fighting for it, we're going to turn into what our cousins are dealing with up in Canada, and I don't think we want that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I went over this tonight, because I wanted everyone to hear everything from Canuck GunNut's perspective, and I wanted everyone to hear, what's going on up there. All right, but again, we need to do a mounted defense to save their nunchucks, because hashtag nunchuck lives matter. So, and yes, I am joking about that, but still, it's hilarious. But with that, we will see you guys later. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Shall not be infringed. Give them the bird. Adios, Felicia. Canuck, GunNut, do you have a catchphrase?
No, not really. I'm not super duper active on YouTube these days, but I am glad to be on here. And I was really glad to be in this interview. Just glad to share my perspective.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and hanging out with us and sharing your perspective and sharing some of the bullshit laws you have to deal with. And I'm sorry that you have to deal with all that stuff. I really
trust me, I hate it. I do not approve of most of them.
I don't approve of them either, and I would not sit down for half of that shit.
Oh yeah, I know, but I
mean,
was born into this.
I'm surprised you Canadians are so damn patient that you don't get up for anything less than what, a cup of Tim Hortons coffee.
And that's mainly because of the way our culture has changed. Because
you just let them walk all over you, honestly.
Well, that and the fact that a lot of Canadians, especially from the 1960s onwards, have been bombarded with a lot of anti-America propaganda, and part of that propaganda is that freedom. Americans are gun-happy lunatics, and subsequently, we need stricter gun laws in order to show our moral superiority to them. And subsequently, that's usually a lot of the justification to use. Like, oh, we don't want to wind up like America. Look at how many school shootings they have. And shit like that.
I got news for you. We're a bigger country. You guys, you're small. No offense, but you guys are smaller than us.
Well, more specifically, we have a smaller population than you guys by at least like 1/10.
Yeah. So, anyone trying to compare your country to our country is a lunatic.
They also fail to take into account the fact that in the case of our situation, even believe it or not, we had more lenient laws on machine guns prior to 1977 than what you guys had in states.
Yeah, but you also have to realize that when you make more gun laws more restrictive, you get more crime. That's just how it works.
And that's literally what's been happening. Actually,
if you have less restrictive gun laws, you have less crime. It's statistically proven.
So, and that's even true here in Canada, because ever since Trudeau's gotten into power, the gun crime rate and gun murder rate has been skyrocketing. And they keep trying to claim that, oh, it's because of the conservative government that ruled previously, we have to put these new gun laws. And yet every time someone points out that you guys realize the gun crime rate has risen since you've gotten into the power and passed more of these gun laws than the other way around. How can you explain that? And it also does not help that with our government in question, with the Liberal Party, they've also been trying to pass legislation that actually significantly reduces the sentences for gun crimes and other violent crimes.
I mean, it's just like here in the United States. They'll throw the book at a citizen who's honestly made a stupid mistake, but when it comes to the cold-hardened criminals, they're just catch them and release them.
Yeah, like was it Chicago or Portland? I forget which city it was, but it was a major city that was literally paying criminals to not shoot each other. Or the article I was just reading, where 5 guys got involved in a shootout and none of them got charged because they were in mutual combat. And I'm like, what the fuck?
It was Chicago trying to do that, yeah.
And I'm like, are they high? Like, I know weed is technically legal here, but are they fucking high to think that makes sense from a legal context in any capacity?
I know.
I'm pretty sure dueling was a crime in both our countries. In the case of Canada, there was a time where the dueling laws were on the books until recently because they realized it was an old
funny thing is, dueling technically is illegal here in the United States now. But at some point in time, it was okay. But the reason why it stopped being a thing is because after that whole duel over the vice presidency, people are just like, yeah, we don't like dueling anymore. Because the what was it, Aaron Burr versus was it Alexander Hamilton?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah, they had that big duel over the vice presidency and whatnot, and then that's right after that, dueling just fell out of favor. But it remained a thing here in the United States up until the early 19th century, where instead of using actual live rounds, they would use wax rounds and percussion pistols, because at most you'd get a bruise, but you could still be dueling.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, weird shit, weird trivia and whatnot. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Thank you all for listening. This was the Hit or Miss special edition, Through the Looking Glass interview with the Canadian. We'll see you guys probably tomorrow. I might do a Thursday edition. I might not. It depends on how the week goes. We will try and do a Friday night strike this week, but if I can't do Thursday or Friday, just remember that, we'll do it next week if I can't do it this week, because it's just how my week is going right now. All right. Any final closing words, Canuck?
No, other than that, I'm glad I was on here, and it was all my pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
To be on here.
All right. So we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. Good night, everybody.
Shut up, infringed!